What is the most Karen thing a Karen has ever done to you, personally? Redditors had some to share, so here we go. Story 1. When I worked at the Home Depot, a Karen told me that she didn't want any black men to install her flooring. I was in charge of arranging her order and told her that we don't select which individuals exactly will install her floor and that she'll get who she gets. She proceeds to have a fit about it, demands white installers, asks to speak to my manager. I'm so glad she did, because my manager's name was Dwayne and he was a real big black dude. Turns out she didn't want to speak to the manager. Story 2. When I worked at a bakery, Karen bought a chocolate cupcake and ate half of it. Karen then asked if she could return her half-eaten chocolate cupcake. Not because she didn't like it, but because she wanted to exchange it for half of a vanilla cupcake, something less decadent. Like most bakeries, we did not sell cupcakes by the half. She became offended when I asked if she wanted to purchase a vanilla cupcake. Story 3. Doctor here. I used to work in a public night shift service, kind of like an emergency room but for non-emergencies, to keep the hospitals clear of white codes. So anything from a fever to a sore throat, to prescriptions for urgent treatments, and a Karen walks in at 3 a.m. asking for a prescription for hypertension drugs, which isn't unusual as people, old people, more often than not, but she looked 55, sometimes don't notice they're running low. Anyway, the law, not a rule, not my decision, the law, states that this service can only write prescriptions for potentially life-threatening conditions drugs for a maximum of 72 hours coverage. So if you take one pill a day, I can only prescribe you a single blister. Here we don't have bottles, but blisters. And while I'm writing the prescription, Karen casually mentioned that she was insomniac. And while cleaning the medicine cabinet, she realized she was down to her last full blister. My pen stops. I ask her to repeat. Full blister? Yeah. So I take the prescription, tear it in half, then again. Then I throw it in the bin, explaining her the law. She gets mad, starts yelling, and threatened to call the cops. Go ahead. Cops came, and she triumphantly announced that I'm refusing to treat her. I explain the situation, and they ask her if it's true that she has a full blister, and she, of course, being a Karen who is always right no matter what, confirms it. The cops look at her, still with a look of triumph, waiting for them to arrest me, then at me, then ask her politely to leave, as I'm in the right. She's livid. The day after, my boss called me and cracked up because she went there during the day to talk to the manager, and she, my boss, told her the exact same thing. Never saw her again in there. Story 4. I deliver appliances for Best Buy. We had a woman call and complain that her fridge was not pre-cooled before it was delivered, and that she had to wait for it to come down to temp. No one in the office was prepared for that one. Story 5. Worked at a grocery store and a coworker put a 99-cent sticker on my shirt. We were 2 of maybe 5 employees, so we were all good friends and everything is funny when you gotta pass time on a shift, so I just left it there. Some woman came through my line and asked me why I had a sticker on my shirt, and I just kinda laughed it off. She asked if I thought it was funny, and I was like, not really but sorta. She asked if my coworker put it there, to which I responded yes. She told me she was going to speak to the store owner cause it was disrespectful to behave that way at work. She told me to call my manager, and I did, but he was a super cool guy and knew this lady was a fucking idiot. She talked to the store owner and my manager about firing me to no avail. She accomplished nothing and was a cunt. The end. Story 6. When I was working retail, this one woman had a big bag of coupons. Most of them were unusable because either they were expired or they were duplicates. She berated me because the system was rejecting most of the coupons. She called me stupid amongst other names, telling me I just wasn't doing it right. Then, as a typical Karen would, she asked to speak with my manager. My manager came and asked what the problem was. The women ranted about how incompetent I was because I didn't know how to scan a coupon. My manager looked at the coupons and the coupons were the problem, not me. My manager bitched out the customer for being disrespectful for me and told the customer to leave the store. I hated working there, but I'm so grateful that I had managers that totally didn't go by the customer is always right rule and weren't afraid to stand up for their employees. That was just one of many incidents. Story 7. When I worked at a popular arcade chain, I had a Karen absolutely berating me because I wouldn't give her kid a prize they didn't win. So she wants a manager, and when my manager comes over, she straight-faced this bitch's whole rant until Karen goes, "Whatever happened to? The customer's always right?" And my manager leans in a little and goes, "We don't have customers here, we have guests. Customers always right, guests are usually wrong, goodbye," and waved a security guard over to escort Karen out. Best day of work ever. Story 8. Was at the park with my daughter. She was 3 at the time. Her and a couple other kids started to play together. Then she attempted to use the monkey bars. She's a very adventurous child. About midway through, she fell. I didn't do anything because she's fallen before, and I want her to learn to get back up on her own and not be scared to try again. Anyway, one of the boys was about to get on the monkey bars too, until I heard a woman run toward him screaming to stop. She picked him up and looked at my daughter. Told her it wasn't smart of her to go on the monkey bars if she wasn't fully ready because then others might get that same idea. That's when I got up and went to my daughter's defense. Sternly told the woman to not speak to her that way, and it's no fault of hers that she wasn't scared to try something new. She took her kid and left. Story 9. I used to work at a fast food in a theme park when I was 18. Karen held up the line cause she was demanding us to assemble a food for her daughter, which we aren't allowed to do cause we go by a menu. My daughter can't have that. Well, what can you do for me? Do you want her to starve? Are one of the most irritating lines I ever encountered. Story 10. I asked for my manager's personal cell phone number to complain that I, 7 months pregnant at the time, would not carry a refrigerator that she had not paid for in the cost of her room up to her second-story room. We did not have an elevator, rather than just accept an upgrade for free because she didn't want to unpack her stuff. She refused to believe we had rooms without fridges, and I was just being fat and lazy. When I refused to give her the cell phone number, she asked for corporate's number. I wrote it down on a sticky note with a smiley face. She came down later and asked to move rooms. I made her pay the difference. Story 11. I used to work retail, so I have come across my fair share of Karens. They were a huge reason why I went back to school and no longer work as a cashier. Anyways, one day while I was manning the registers with a few other coworkers of mine, I had a massive nosebleed right as I was finishing a transaction. I grabbed a tissue and quickly excused myself to run to the restroom so I could try to get it to stop bleeding. This meant that I couldn't say goodbye to Karen and give the little spiel about how I was oh so grateful for her shopping with us. Anyways, after about 10 minutes, I was finally able to get my nose back under control and headed back to the registers. I saw her waiting to the side with a scowl on her face, arms crossed over her chest, the whole 9 yards. She proceeded to scold me about how rude I was for not saying goodbye. After I apologized and explained that I had an unexpected nosebleed, she told me I should have tried holding it in and that the customer comes first. Story 12. I was a supervisor at Cost Plus World Market. A Karen comes in one night pushing a cart full of obviously used throw pillows and asks to return them. Of course she has no receipt, and instead wants us to just look her up in the system, except she refuses to provide her information for us to try to look her up. She starts yelling at my cashier, and that's when I stepped in to tell her very politely and calmly that she either needs a receipt or needs to provide us her name and phone number. She starts screeching and screaming about how we're assholes and she'll get us fired and blah blah blah. Then she demands an apology from the president of the world. I am certain she meant the president of World Market, but in her bleached hair fury she said, the president of the world, and I barely held it together as I calmly offered her the corporate feedback number. She wouldn't take it and instead walked out of the store still yelling and without her cart of dirty pillows. She returned about 20 minutes later, quietly apologized, and took her pillows with her. We never heard from her again. Oh, glad you are still here. Support us by subscribing and I won't be a Karen. Story 13. My sister-in-law is the biggest Karen I've ever met, complains in almost every restaurant we have gone to, but this one time they were moving house and my bro asked me to help. I was staying at their place for the delivery truck that was to arrive early in the morning. We were having drinks and my bed/mattress was on the living room floor. At around 1:15 I said, I think I'm going to go to bed. She replied, are you kicking me out of my own living room? Not realizing she is crazy, I joke, I guess I am. She said no one does that, and even though she had finished her last drink, made herself 2 cups of tea. She didn't go to bed till after 2:30. She told me the next morning, she stayed up to show no one tells her what to do. Story 14. I was standing on a crowded train and a pregnant Karen started screaming at me because she had nowhere to sit. Me, the person who was standing because there were no seats. She started screaming like it was my fault that there were no seats. Story 15. I worked at a home improvement store for a while in college. I was a cashier in the garden section. This woman pulls up on the curb in a no parking zone, grabs her fertilizer and soil. After I check out, she goes fucking ballistic that I didn't help load her car, and she was going to report me to managers. Due to company policy, I wasn't allowed to. Other employees were though. Her face mole was shaking and everything, over a bag of soil that weighed under 10 pounds and a handle of fertilizer. Story 16. One time, Karen put her own hair in her half-eaten plate of food and then threw a royal shit fit, demanding that her meal be comped and that she speak to the manager. I went into the back of the restaurant, pulled out the orange hair with 3 inches of regrowth and asked the Mexican guys in the kitchen, HEY, did any of you bring a wig to work today? They told me to fuck off. Went back out, told Karen that nobody on staff has red hair with blonde roots, while staring directly at her disastrous dye job, but the manager said we would be happy to buy dessert for the whole table to make up for this strange phenomenon. The 4 other people at the table were clearly mortified and declined dessert. She ordered cheesecake, and they all sat there and glared at her while she devoured it. Fucking Karen. Story 17. This random lady that lived in my neighborhood said I couldn't bike in front of her house without wearing a helmet because she was afraid of getting sued by my parents if I were to fall off my bike in front of her house, or something along those lines. I was like 8. Told her the street wasn't her property and rode away. Didn't really look back for a reaction. Story 18. I worked at McDonald's during the time they switched to Child's Fries and discontinued the caramel dip in Happy Meals. Everyone was pretty cool with it, but one country club-looking Karen came in with her daughter and ordered a nugget Happy Meal with 3 cups of caramel dip because Braylon likes to dip her nuggets in it. I apologized and let her know we discontinued to caramel dip, which resulted in an instant meltdown. Kid threw herself down on the floor in an absolute screaming tantrum, and Karen was screaming at me that we do have caramel dip and I'm obviously keeping it from her. Then the accusations of me, a 17-year-old, purposely trying to starve her daughter. Honestly, kid could have benefited from starving a bit. I've ruined her day. She's a regular customer, but she's never coming back. Where's my manager? Typical Karen stuff. Manager eventually came out and just grabbed a sundae cup and filled it with a couple pumps of caramel, and Karen gave me a smug look and flipped me off.
Story 19.
My manager Karen sat me down for an hour after my shift had ended preaching to me why it was my fault I was physically assaulted by a customer. Story 20. I used to own a photography store, sold cameras and did pictures for passports, etc. We opened at 1 p.m. on Mondays, but I happened to be at the store on Monday morning because I needed to get something, was planning on just grabbing what I needed and go home when Karen tried to get in through the locked door. Door had a sign on it that said we were closed, and a sign with our opening hours. I didn't turn on any of the lights, so it was also very dark inside. Karen started banging on the door. I was just about to leave, so I went outside to tell her we were closed. Karen didn't take it well, and immediately demanded to speak to the manager. I said that I'm the owner. She then proceeded to shout and curse, so much so that the manager of the supermarket across the street came out to help me. She then tried to make the supermarket manager force me to open my store almost 4 hours earlier. Didn't work. Never seen the woman again. Oh, that's all for Karen's stories. More on your way soon. So, please subscribe and enjoy the Reddit oddities.